Welcome to the future of tea. This is no ordinary tea. Imagine a beverage with 5,000 years of history, a heritage that is unparalleled, consumed only next to water in terms of quantity all around the world. Such a special beverage that it was the preferred beverage of kings and emperors throughout history. Tea is philosophy. This beverage and its inspiring leaf contains a very special story. It is a story of artistry, it is a story of expertise, and it is a story with history. Each leaf is picked by hand. Imagine that. Starting at the dawn, thousands of tea pickers around the country in Sri Lanka fan out across our mountains, picking 2 leaves and a bud. And then those 2 leaves and a bud are all brought together, processed in a manufacturing process that is so traditional that it has persevered and been perfected over 150 years. That is tradition. That is real tea. And that is what we offer in the tea series. The story in each of these teas is incredible. Each different, each varied, each unique. Let me tell you why. When you assess a tea, you look at it on the eye, on the nose, and only then on the palate. And the reason, each offers a different clue as to the heritage, the history, and the unique personality of each tea. Let's take this one, a beautiful, light and bright Nuarelia Pekoe. It has a light olive green complexion in its leaf, and that suggests it is grown at a high elevation, up in the cool mountains where eucalyptus trees and wild mint make the air fragrant, and that is something that is taken on by this tea. As a result, you have a beautiful infusion, light golden in color, bright around the edges, inspiring. Now the story that it continues to tell, each of these teas, is one of expertise, the expertise of the tea maker, who determines at exactly which stage fermentation should stop. And of course that is important because fermentation is where the taste of each tea develops. And that is why we say each tea is unique. Not only is it related to the leaf or the process, but it is related to each day, each time. And so tea has this incredible sense of terroir, a sense of time and a sense of place. Each of these teas, let me explain. We taste each week over 5,000 different teas at Dilmah. And we taste those teas because what we taste today from the Magastalawa estate or Queensberry estate would be different again tomorrow, depending on that wonderful natural alchemy of rainfall, of climate, of soil, and of course the art of the tea maker. And that is where the expertise comes in. The expertise of the tea taster, who must taste, evaluate on the eye, on the nose, on the palate, understanding the story that each leaf conveys, understanding the story that the infusion relates, and understanding that wonderful story of taste that the liquor conveys. And that brings me to something very important. It brings me to why my father decided in 1950 that he would devote his life to tea. It seems incredible, doesn't it? 56 years in tea. Something I think that would be unimaginable for a young man of 20 to set out to do. A lifetime in tea. But that's what it takes, because tea is a wonderful, noble beverage. Tea philosopher Kakuzo Okakura once said that tea is a noble beverage and it requires a master's touch. There is no truer phrase spoken about tea, because if you imagine this enormous variety, teas that change from moment to moment. If it rained last night on St. James Estate, you will find a different liquor tomorrow. If it is bright and sunny on Dumugastalawa Estate, you will find a stronger and grittier, more robust liquor from the teas that are produced the day after. Each individual, each with their unique terroir, and personality. What a wonderful beverage tea is. Going back to my father, when he devoted his life to tea, there were other factors. He understood that tea was becoming just another beverage. And I suppose you could say that in the hands of big companies, that is so, a beverage that might become a cause for profit, simply profit. Of course, profit is important, but there are other things that are more important, especially in a natural beverage like tea. When you consider the infinite variety that I spoke of, you will also understand that it is absolutely impossible for that variety, for that beauty, that sophistication to be captured by anything other than someone who is an artist, who loves what they do, who has a passion for tea. And that is exactly why my father and my family have devoted our lives to tea. As for why I said this is no ordinary tea, each of these teas, each of the almost 50 different teas we offer in the tea series has a story. It is a story of tradition, of the heritage of a great industry. It is a story of good health, and it is a story of artistry, of expertise, of experience. But there's more. When my father set out to offer consumers around the world the finest tea on earth, he also set out to address certain inequities in this great tea industry. By the time he started up in tea, the world of tea became dominated by big companies, attracted by profits and the popularity of tea in the West. Most of the wonderful family businesses that had offered variety and this inspiring commitment to tea were taken over. They were bought out by big business. And of course, what is to be expected happened. The profit motive, commercialization, overtook the purity of the leaf, the commitment and passion to tea, its freshness, its healthfulness, and all the wonderful things that we spoke about a few moments ago. And that was a shame. But there was more. In that process of commoditization, in that process, you could say, of multinationalization, something else happened. The worker, ethics, and integrity were lost. In Sri Lanka, Ceylon, over 1 million people depend on the tea industry. Them and their families rely on this industry for their daily survival. What of them when suddenly big business comes along and says, look, we want tea that is cheap. We don't want this wonderful, inspiring, sophisticated beverage with all its subtlety, its nuances, and its sophistication. We want tea cheap. Well, then you get a very cheap beverage and you lose an industry built on tradition, heritage, and artistry. But that's not what my father wanted. And that is exactly what he struggled against. It took him almost 40 years, 4 decades nearly, to succeed, to raise his head in this multinational, big company dominated world. But he did it. And when he brought Dilmah in 1988 to the first consumers in Australia, it marked something much more significant than just another launch of a brand of tea. It marked the first producer, grower-owned tea that made its debut direct to consumers, offering tea, garden fresh, picked, perfected, and packed at origin and direct to consumers. There's 2 aspects to that. First, the fact that fresh tea is much richer in health-giving antioxidants. Whether you talk of flavonoids, which help against every conceivable chronic disease, including cancers, including diabetes, including cholesterol, so many problems that ail our modern world. Flavonoids, the antioxidants in tea, help and give strong protective elements. Well, fresh tea is the richest in this, and with Dilmah, we pick, perfect, pack, and supply tea direct to consumers, making it, of course, much fresher in the process. The second aspect, which is as important, integrity. And that was the cornerstone that brought every intention and every objective that young Merrill J. Fernando had at the age of 20 in London. Well, integrity in tea. It sounds a little bit confusing, but let me explain. When commoditization and commercialization affected the tea industry, it was brought about by big companies. It was not brought about by consumers. And that's important because as consumers, they still wanted a special tea, a tea that was full of richness, of flavor, of good health, of aroma, all those wonderful, sophisticated characteristics that we talked about. It wasn't the consumer that wanted commercialization in tea. It was the traders, the big companies that began to dominate the business. And so he decided that Dilmah would be different, that his Dilmah, then only a vision, only a dream, that it would be very different. And that brings me to integrity. When he created the ability to communicate direct with consumers on these wonderful aspects of tea, he also began the process of securing the future of this ancient and wonderful Ceylon tea industry. At the time, our industry was ailing. It was suffering from the vicissitudes of multinationalization, of commercialization, that meant that this beverage and this rich natural heritage was being lost simply because the new owners of the tea industry were saying, we want tea with price. We don't want tea with quality. My father's mission was to combat that. And he did that to bring integrity to tea because he brought an awareness by communicating to consumers what real tea is. Real tea embodies everything we discussed a few moments ago. And when you consume real tea, you are helping to bring a smile to the faces of tea plantation workers in Sri Lanka. That is the ethics. Those are the ethics in Dilmah. And there's more. Revenue from the global sales of Dilmah in over 92 different countries fund the work of the MJF Charitable Foundation. The foundation spends several $1 million each year in bringing that smile to more than just the tea plantation workers. The foundation operates today in over 100 different projects around Sri Lanka, ranging from urban slum children, giving them a future, to offering relief to victims of tsunami, through to helping plantation workers, of course, securing an education for their children, helping deaf and dumb children in isolated and remote Siambalandua district in Sri Lanka. A lot of projects, over 120, which seek to touch the lives of almost 10,000 people each year. And that is what my father set out to do, to make his business a matter of human service. Quality, freshness, healthfulness, integrity, and ethics, all in your cup of tea.